But this story is really close to my heart. I met him the day that Snoopy died. The day that a part of me was buried. That part of me had been around since my birth. I remember as a toddler crawling around on the floor with my best friend in the world, my floppy-eared hound dog companion, Boomer. We were like brothers. I remember growing up and hiding that part of me, like we all do. We all put up these walls and defenses, and losing that sense of self for a really long time. My friends would call me a chameleon because I would just sort of blend into the next group instead of having my own identity. But that changed during high school, especially my senior year of high school, because I was surrounded by an incredible group of friends. I had this amazing best friend and this awesome girlfriend who would support me and encourage all of my eccentricities. And it was right after graduation, after I'd had my graduation party and made my thousands and thousands of dollars, and as I sat there swimming in my pool like Scrooge McDuck, we started to talk about what we could do with this money. Because, it wasn't just my money. I felt like my girlfriend and my best friend also had earned it. So we were talking about what we could do. We could buy booze, right? Come on, high school student just graduated, 19. Sounds good. We could go to New York City. We'd never been there before. That sounds cool. Or we could produce a musical. Because that's what theater people do. So that's what we decided to do. We took all of our $3,000 and we put on a musical, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. For those of you who don't know, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown is based off Charles Schulz's comic strip, Peanuts, and it involves all of your favorite characters, Snoopy, Lucy, Charlie Brown, Linus, Schroeder, Sally, etc. And they're in different vignettes that seem to be taken right from the comic book and put together in a nice little piece. And the first time I heard it was my junior year of high school, and I fell in love with the music. But more than that, I fell in love with the character of Snoopy. There was something about Snoopy that just really got me going. It was his confidence and his adventurousness. It was the way that he carried himself, conducted himself. It was his doggishness. All those things I wanted and I felt were a part of me, but just weren't being expressed. So as a producer of the musical, I could have easily just cast myself as Snoopy. But I was a pretty traditional theater person, and I felt that there should be an audition process. So I brought in a director. Benjamin's laughing, okay. I brought in a director who brought in a couple of other people, and there was a trio of people that sat at the table to audition each and every person. And I got up and I thought my audition went really well. And I looked at the callback sheet, and I had been called back for the role of Schroeder. Not that I have anything against Schroeder, but to say that I was pissed, put it lightly. But I was a good sport about it. I thought, you know what? Whoever is going to play the role of Snoopy deserves it. They're going to be awesome, and I will rock out Schroeder because he's pretty cool and he plays the piano, which I don't do, but I'll pretend, because that's what actors do. We pretend. When the cast list came out, there was a surprise. I was not cast as Schroeder. I was, in fact, cast as Snoopy. And my heart leapt because I knew finally I would have a chance to express myself freely. And as it turned out, my girlfriend was cast as Lucy. And ironically enough, my best friend was cast as Charlie Brown. We were the triumvirate. We were the ones who produced the show. We made it happen. And it was during this time that my identity, which had been taking shape, was finally unleashed. I learned a lot during You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I learned how to produce a show, how to run a theater company, how to cater towards little children, because they're definitely a different breed. And I also learned about myself. I learned who I was. I learned that I wasn't just playing the role of Snoopy, but I was somehow becoming him. Like a true Gemini, I had two sides. There was the human side and there was the Snoopy side, the doggish human side. And my friends were really supportive of this. They were encouraging, again, my Charlie Brown and my Lucy. And it didn't stop there. It kept growing. You know, I would go places and little kids who saw me in the show would call me Snoopy. My parents and my friends would start buying me gifts. I mean, I still have a room full of Snoopy stuff that Benjamin's trying to get rid of, huh, Benji? Oh, yeah. He doesn't like kitsch. And it kept growing and growing, and it kept allowing me to be free. Charlie Brown and I, our relationship grew and grew and grew over the next few years, and so did my relationship with Lucy, until at some point that one hit a snag. We started having issues. Maybe it was because I was at college and she was living in Kent and we were far away from each other. Maybe it was just because we were growing apart. But at the time, I really couldn't help but think that we could really have used some of Lucy's good advice. Only costs a nickel, right? Problem was, neither one of us had enough sense. Wah, wah. I'm sorry, do I have to give credit for every joke? That joke comes from Benjamin Rexroad. How come I didn't get credit during your story? What's going on? Well, we eventually broke up, and that was more her decision than it was mine. So I was heartbroken, and that part of me that had started to express itself retreated into the doghouse, you could say. Now, thankfully, Charlie Brown was still around, and he knew how to coax me out. He would have me come over to his house so we could play, or he would take me on walks, or he would take me to shows. There just happened to be a show that his brother was in. It was happening at the University of Akron. His brother was playing the role of Schroeder, all grown up. This show is called Dog Sees God, which is a palindrome, which is really cool. But it's also an awesome show about the Charlie Brown gang all grown up, dealing with adult situations, gender identity, sexual identity, suicide, light topics. And I was apprehensive to go to this show because I knew it was going to bring up some really raw emotions, some emotional scars within myself. But I wanted to see Schroeder, and I wanted to hang out with Charlie Brown, so I went. And I remember distinctly sitting in the front row of a sold-out house and waiting for the lights to come up. A single tear dripped down my cheek as I thought about Lucy and how I had lost her somehow for being who I was. And that maybe I should just hide it and never let that part out again. Spotlight comes up. Right on Snoopy's doghouse. It's empty. No Woodstock, no Beagle. CB, Charlie Brown, enters stage right. Red food dish in hand, no food. He places it at the base of the doghouse. He looks down mournfully. And it was around that moment I realized that this was a funeral. That the Charlie Brown characters were burying Snoopy. And it was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. Here I was feeling exactly what I was witnessing. The show was beautiful. I cried, I laughed. It was one of the top 5 shows I've ever seen. And I've seen shows in Seattle, Washington. I've seen shows in downtown Chicago, in New York City. Top 5. And after seeing it, I knew I had to meet the director. I had to work with the director. So I asked Charlie Brown, who the hell is this guy? How could he see into my soul like this? Is he some kind of magic man? And as it turned out, the director and Schroeder had gotten really close. And Schroeder had invited him to move into the apartment in Highland Square where he and Charlie Brown lived. Well, that's where I was hanging out all the time, at Charlie Brown and Schroeder's house. So I got to meet the director, and he did seem like a really badass guy. We got to know each other more and more. I remember on my birthday, I turned 21, and the only person that brought me a gift, not that I'm bitter, but the only person that brought me a gift was the director. He brought a box of fruit popsicles that were delicious. And he knew right then the way to my heart was through my stomach. A couple nights later, the director Schroeder and I were hanging out, working on this really trippy puzzle. And it was super late, Charlie Brown was in bed, and we started talking about our summer plans. And the director asked me, like, what I was gonna do. And I told him, you know what? I'm pretty sure that my mom and I are gonna get a cat together because I'm living in her basement. The look he gave me was one of such agony. He took Schroeder aside into another room, and they had a very heated conversation. Next thing I knew, they came back in. Schroeder, standing over me, looked directly at me, pointed to me, and said, "You're moving in." And I said, "I thought the director was moving in." And the director said, "Oh, I am, but nobody is living in their parents' basement and buying a cat with their mother." So after we talked to Charlie Brown about it, I did decide to move in. And it was at that time, I probably should have done this beforehand, but I was a 21-year-old, so I didn't know better. I finally found the room we were gonna move into. And it turned out that I was not having my own room. I was moving into the exact same room that the director was moving into. And it was about the square footage of this carpet. Our beds were literally on top of each other. So I knew right then and there that we were either going to love each other or hate each other. Now, at this time, I was still in the doghouse, still retreating, and I was hoping that my Charlie Brown could get me out of my funk, but he was dealing with his own issues. So it fell upon someone else. And who was there to pick up the mantle? But my new roommate, the director. We started to go on walks. We talked about Lucy. We talked about the breakup, about love, about philosophy, religion, life, very light conversation. And we started to get to know each other. Every curve, freckle, dimple, scar. And we fell in love with each other. He found out my affinity for dogs. And he played with it. He loved it. He would be like, "I'm gonna go take Kyle on a walk." Or he would bring home cookies for me to eat as treats. Again, he knew the way to my heart. And it was during this time that I really realized the power of love. And that it didn't matter that, yes, this person, this director happened to be a male, and before that I'd only ever dated females, only ever fallen for females. But there was a power in this love. And this director, he and I ended up getting together. I was his dog, he was my bear. We have #DogAndBearAdventures. The director's name is Benjamin Rexroad.
Sounds like a dick.
Most of the time. He taught me that yes, Snoopy may have died, but I didn't have to bury that because I was his little buddy. And I will be his little buddy in this life and the next. Thank you all for coming to Full Circle Storytelling, The Collected Works.